We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Aleph Amid Aleph Meseches Menachos. This is Menachos Daf 91a. On the previous summit, the Gemara said, according to Rabbi Yonasan, you need a special pasuk to teach that if one takes upon himself to bring an ola, that he doesn't have to bring two animals, one in the category of buck or cattle, and one in the category of tzon, which is flock. And so you need a pasuk to teach that. And on the previous summit, the Gemara asked, why does Rabbi Yonasan need a pasuk to teach that? Rabbi Yonasan in general says, anytime the pasuk has a list, it is always understood as either or, unless it says yachtav, and it doesn't say yachtav over here. So why would we think anything other than either or? Of course, you only have to bring one animal. And the Gemara now continues and answers, Hoel uksiv umin hatzon, since it says umin hatzon with a vav, which is similar to a connecting word like yachtav, keman dechsiv yachtav dami. That's as if it did say yachtav, and therefore, if it's the equivalent of yachtav, really one might think you have to bring two animals. That's why we need a pasuk to teach just one animal. And the Gemara continues and asks, Ulu Rabbi Yoshia, now according to Rabbi Yoshia, he's the one who argues on Rabbi Yonasan, Diyamar, that he says, Afagav de loksiv yachtav, that even if it doesn't say yachtav, kemandechsiv yachtav dami, it is as if it says yachtav, so we really should understand that you have to bring two animals, and so liboikra, we actually should require a pasuk to teach that you don't have to bring two animals, which Rabbi Yoshia uses the pasuk for something else. And the Gemara says to that, Haksiv, no, it's written in the pasuk, we do have a source, it says, Im ola karbano min habakar, if an ola is its carbon from bakar, v'im min hatzon karbano, and then it says im min hatzon karbano, and so that essentially tells you they are separated, and therefore, again, according to Rabbi Yoshia, you're only going to bring one animal. Now, v'idach, the other opinion of Yonasan, so itzrich, no, that pasuk is necessary, because salkadai techamina, one might think hani mili b'mefarish. That's in a situation where the person is mefarish, he is explicit about what he's going to bring. He says he's going to bring, for example, from bakar. Avo bistama, but let's say he doesn't make it clear. He just says in general he's going to bring an ola. So one still again might think laisi mitarvayu. He has to bring one animal from each of them. He has to bring two animals, and that's why again kamash malan. That's why the pasuk specifically has to teach us that it is either or. And the Gemara now continues and analyzes the Brisa. Amar Mar, the master said, we said in the Brisa above, Toda minayin, from where do we know that a Toda requires Nesachim? Talmud Lomar, O Zevach. It says O Zevach, that is an inclusion, it includes the carbon Toda. The Gemara says, Atu Toda lav Zevachu, but isn't Toda just Zevach? It should be included in the general Zevach. And the Gemara continues, Itzrich, no, the special inclusion is necessary. Salkadai dechamina, one might have thought, Hoel v'iko lechem bahada, since the carbon toda comes together with lechem, it comes with loaves, so maybe lo tiboy nesachim, maybe it would not require nesachim, and so therefore we need a pasuk to say that nesachim are required. The Gemara asks, el nazir, but what's the difference between the toda and the ram of the nazir? De'ika bahadei lechem, because the ram of the nazir, there is lechem, there is loaves. Uboy nesachim, and nesachim are required. So that shouldn't make any difference. The Gemara answers, Salkadai techamina, one might think hasam shnei minin. Over there, the lechem is of two types, hacha arba'as minin, but when it comes to the carbon toda, it's actually four different types of loaves, and therefore it's different. And so again, kamash malan, that's why we need the pasuk to teach that nesachim are required. But the Gemara continues, V'lichtov rachmana lefale neder olin edava. Why doesn't the pasuk just say lefale neder olin edava, things, karbanos that are donated? V'lo boy ola, then it wouldn't need to say ola, because ola would automatically be included in something that is donated. And the Gemara says to that, Ilo kasav rachmana ola, had the pasuk not written the word ola, havamina, one might have thought, va'asisem isha la'ashem, that we should interpret the pasuk as follows. It says, va'asisem isha la'ashem klal, that's a generalization. And then lefale neder olin edava, it says lefale neder olin edava, that's prat, that's a specification, that it's not just a carbon that's an isha la'ashem, it's a neder and edava. And then l'reach nichoach, when it says as a reach nichoach, as a pleasant aroma, chazar uchlal, that's another generalization. And so then I would have thought, klal upratu klal, the rule is that by a klal upratu klal, iyatadon elokein haprat, you're going to include only that which is similar to what was specified. And again, over here, what was specified was neder o nedava. So ma'aprat mefurish davar she'eno ba'al chet, just like what was specified is something that does not come for sin, af kol she'en ba'al chet, so too we're only going to include that which does not come for a sin. Otzi chatos v'yasham, then I would exclude chatos and asham, she'en ba'in al chet, that comes for sin. And Avi Bechor Meiser Pesach, and I would include Bechor Meiser and Pesach, She'ein Boin Al Chet, they do not come for sin. This is all what one would have thought. And so Talmud Lomar Ola, that's why the pasuk says Ola. And the idea is that the word ola excludes anything that is an obligatory offering. But the Gemara continues and asks, Hashda dichsiv ola, but now that it says ola, so klalu prat ma marbis be. So this klalu prat, what are we including? And Rashi Ksaviyat explains, Talmud lomar ola, the pasuk says ola miribuye dekra, from this inclusion in the pasuk mimatinon, we exclude bechoru meiser, we exclude bechor and meiser. V'darshinan ma prat mefurish kedil kamon yatsu bechoru meiser. We darshan again what is specified by the prat comes to exclude bechor and meiser. Uparach, and so then the Gemara asks, V'hashda, but now dichsiv ola, that ola is written lemuute bechor meiser, and that excludes bechor meiser. Af kol dechlalu prat. So then we say anything similar, etc., and we're including something. My marbis be. What exactly are we including? Hakol hatuunim nesachim ksuvim beparsha behedya. Now everything that requires nesachim is already written in the parsha. And the Gemara continues and answers, Maha prat mefurash, just like that which is specified is something sheino mechuyev va'omed, which is not a standing obligation. Afkol sheino mechuyev va'omed, so to anything which is not a standing obligation. And what does that come to include? Lahavi valdos kachim, that comes to include the offspring of karbanos utmurasan, and the tmura of karbanos, the attempted substitute animal of a karban. Viola haba min hamosaros, and also an ola that comes from osaros, which is surplus. V'osham shenitik l're'iyah, and a carbon asham which has been consigned to grazing. V'chol hazvachim shenizbechu shelo lishman, and all karbanos which were sacrificed, slaughtered, not for their sake. And Rashi Ksaviyat explains, L'havi valdos kachim, to include the offspring of karbanos shel nekeva, that would be the offspring of a female animal carbon, kagon shlamim, like a shlamim, utmura shel shlamim, and then also the attempted substitute of a shlamim, again by tmura. Not only is the substitute kadosh, but also the original remains kadosh. V'ola haba min ha-tmura, and an ola that comes from tmura, that means tmuras ola, you have the attempted substitute of an ola. V'asham shemesu ba'olav, and let's say a carbon asham where the owner died, o nischapru ba'acher, maybe they got an atonement with another animal, tekaimalan, because we've established kol shebechatos mesa, anytime a chatos would be left to die, would be locked in a cell to die, ba'asham roa, by the asham we say that it grazes till it develops a mum, shenitik l're'iyah, shemasaru l'ro, it's given over to the shepherd, ve'aminim perakama, asham shenitik l're'iyah. If you have such a case of an asham shenitik l're'iyah, v'shachtu stam kosher li'ola, if it's slaughtered with no particular intention, it's kosher as an ola. V'hahu ola boy nesachim, and the point is that ola will require nesachim. Lishnachrina garsin, in another text is as follows: v'ola haba min hamosaros, the ola that comes from surplus. Kol hanuch damrinan yiplu damav l'nedava, that would refer to any situation where we say that the money falls to donation. V'osa nedava hainu olas l'keitz hamizbeach. Nedava means that it's a carbon ola for the keitz hamizbeach when the mizbeach would otherwise be idle. Ukegon moser nesachim, and also like moser nesachim that we just learned about on the previous daf. Damrinan le'el habasar la mizbeach va'oros la kohanim. We say again, the meat is to the mizbeach and the oros, the hides, to the kohanim. Avoli lav miyuta de ola. Now, if not for the exclusion of ola, kevan de neder unedava lav dafka, since it's not specifically neder nedava, havidarshi beilarabos kol sheino ba'al chet, we would have made a drasha to include anything that does not come for sin. And the idea over here is that the generalization is including these cases because they don't come directly. They're not directly neder nedava. They come as a result of neder nedava. For example, the offspring of the carbon, etc. Those are also included based on the klal. And the Gemara continues and asks, V'hashta da'amrit o l'drasha, now that you said that the word o is used as a drasha when we said bakar o tzon, cattle or flock, we interpreted before for drasha purposes, so we can ask the same question, Lefale neder o l'nedava lamali. It says Lefale neder o l'nedava, what is that for? And the Gemara says to that, Lechalkam, it's to divide them. Because itzrich, it's necessary as follows. Salkadai techamina, one might have thought, ad demaisi neder unedava, lowly by nesachim, unless somebody brings both a neder and a nedava, nesachim would not be required. Kamash malon, so it's coming to teach us, the aisi neder lechudei, liboy nesachim, if he brings just a neder, nesachim is required. V'aisi nedava lechudei, laisi nesachim, and also if he brings just nedava, then nesachim is required. And the difference, of course, between neder and nedava is neder is harei olai, when a person says it's upon me to bring a carbon, then there is achrayis, then the person has to bring the animal. If something happens to the first animal, he'll have to bring another animal. By nedava, it's harei zu, this animal is a carbon. If something happens to that particular animal, there's no need for that person to bring a different animal. And the Gemara continues and asks, Hanichal Rabbi Yoshi, that's good according to Rabbi Yoshi. As we said, Rabbi Yoshi, he needs the word o to separate, otherwise one would think that it's both together. El Rabbi Yonasan, but according to Rabbi Yonasan, who automatically automatically assumes that it's either or. So lamali, so why do I need this? Oh, what is it teaching us? And the Gemara continues and answers, Salkadai Techamina, one might have thought, I see neder l'chudei liboy nesachim. If one brings just a neder, then nesachim is required. I see nedava l'chudei liboy nesachim. And if one just has a nedava, then nesachim is required. But I see neder unedava. Let's say a person brings both neder and nedava. Maybe tiski ben nesachim dechad. Maybe one nesachim is enough. So kamash malon, that's what the pasuk is teaching, that in that case, two nesachim would be required. And the Gemara continues and asks, O b'moadechem lamali, what do we do with the word O b'moadechem? It says, or on your festivals. And the Gemara says to that, Salkadai t'chamina, because one might have thought, Hani mili t'kamaisi ola b'neder ushlam b'nedava. Maybe this is only true if an ola is brought as a neder and a shlam as an adava, inami ipcha, or the reverse. Aval hecha t'kamaisi ola ushlam b'neder. But let's say a person brings an ola and a shlamim as a neder. Inami ola ushlam b'nedava, or let's say he brings an ola and shlamim as an adava, so then maybe shem neder echad v'shem nedava achasi. Maybe it's all one neder, it's all considered one nedava, v'tiski le b'nesachim dechad, and then one nesachim should be enough. And so kamash malon, that's what the pasuk teaches. O b'moadechem, again the word O in the phrase O b'moadechem, again that one nesachim is not sufficient. And the Gemara continues, the pasuk says, v'chitase ben bakar ola o zevach lamali. It says if there's a ben bakar ola o zevach, what do we do with that O? And the Gemara says to that again, it's needed. Salkadai t'chamina, one might have thought, Hani mili heicha d'kamaisi ola ushlamim b'neder. If a person brings the ola and shlam as a neder, inami ola ushlamim b'nedava, or let's say he brings an ola and shlam as nedava. Aval heicha d'kamaisi shtei olos, but let's say he brings two olos, chader b'neder v'chader b'nedava. One is a neder and one is a nedava. Inami shnei shlamim, or let's say he brings two shlamim, echad b'neder v'echad b'nedava. One is a neder, one is a nedava. So then again, ema shem shlamim achasi. Maybe I would say it's all one shlamim. Shem ola achasi, it's all one ola. V'tizgi le b'nesachim dechad, and again, one nesachim should be enough. Kamash malon, again, that's what the pasuk teaches, that it has to be two. And lafali neder o shlamim lamali, it says lafali neder o shlamim. So again, what is the O over there teaching? And the Gemara says, Salkadai t'chamina, one might have thought, Hani mili hecha d'maisi shtei olos. That's if one brings two olos, chada b'neder, v'chada b'nedava. One is a neder, one is a nedava. Inami shnei shlamim, or two shlamim, chada b'neder, v'chada b'nedava. One is a neder, one is a nedava. Aval hecha d'kamaisi shtei olos b'neder, but if he brings two olos as a neder, u'shtei olos b'nedava, or two olos as nedava. Inami shnei shlamim b'neder, u'shnei shlamim b'nedava, or two shlamim as neder, or two shlamim as nedava. So again, shem ola echad hu v'shem neder echad. It's all one ola, it's all one neder. V'tiski le b'nesachim dechad. It should be enough with one libations. And so again, kamash malon, it comes to teach us that they are separate. And the Gemara continues and asks, Rabbi Yoshia, according to Rabbi Yoshia, who generally understands psukim to mean either or, Hai min habakar o min hatzon lamali. What is the O in the phrase min habakar o min hatzon? What is that for? Min habakar o min hatzon in general, according to Rabbi Yoshia, excluded the bird karbanos, but what does he do specifically with the word O? And the Gemara says to that, Salkadai d'chamina, one might have thought, Hani mili b'trei mine, that's true when it's of two kinds. Aval b'chad mine, but if it's of one kind, tizgi le b'nesachim dechad, again, one libation should be enough. Kamash malon, that's what the pasuk is teaching. And the idea over here is that trei mine, two kinds, means two different kinds of animals, and chad mina means one kind of animal. And the Gemara continues and asks, Kacha tasu la'echad lamali. Why does the pasuk say Kacha tasu la'echad? That pasuk also seems to be stressing that each karban needs its own nesachim. And the Gemara says to that, Salkadai t'chamina, one might have thought, Hani mili bozeh charzeh. That's true if it's one after the other. Aval b'vasachas, but if it's all at the same time, tiski le b'nesachim dechad, then again one nesachim should be enough. And kamash malon, that's what the pasuk is teaching. Each karban needs its own nesachim. And Rashi explains, Hani mili deboy shnei nesachim l'shnei karbanos. It's only that one requires two nesachim for two karbanos. Hecha dehukdash zeh achar zeh. If they're sanctified one after the other, vehevi and kechan, and brought together. Aval hecha demekachi b'vasachas, but if they were sanctified together, vehevi and b'vasachas, and brought together, tiski b'nesachim dechad. Again, one might think one nesachim is enough. Kamash malon, it teaches again a nesachim for each. And Rashi explains, going back to bitrei mine, two types of animals, hu deboy nesachim l'chalchad. One might think only there nesachim is needed for each. Bechad min hatzon o bakar. Again, you have from flock and then from cattle. Those are two different types. And then we say no. Again, in all situations, each karban needs its own nesachim. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Elo shachataso shel mitzora va'ashamo to nesachim, except the chatos and the asham of mitzora, they require nesachim, even though in general chatos and asham do not require, but of mitzora they do. And the Gemara says, Menohani mili, from where do we know this? The Tana Rabbanan, as the sages taught in a brayso, so shlosha esronim solas mincha, it says, shlosha esronim, 3 saron of solas mincha, b'mincha haboim hazevach hakasam medaber. This pasuk is talking about the mincha that accompanies the animal. Now you're saying it's the mincha that accompanies the animal. Maybe it's an independent mincha. When it says in the pasuk, it says the Kohen's going to offer up the ola and mincha. That means that we're talking about the mincha that accompanies the carbon. I still don't know if it requires libations or not. Talmud Lomar, the pasuk says, it says there's a quarter of a hin of yayin for libation. Tasa al ha'ola ola zevach la keves o'echad. It says that's for the ola or zevach, the keves o'echad, the one lamb. Now ola, when it says ola zu olas mitzora, that's the ola of the mitzora. Zevach, when it says zevach zu chatos mitzora, that's the chatos of the mitzora. Ola zevach, when it says ola zevach zu asham mitzora, that is the asham of the mitzora. That is therefore the source for the chatos and the asham of the mitzora requiring nesachim. The Gemara continues, v'tepikli tarvayim zevach. Why not learn them both out from zevach? And Rashi Ksaviat explains, Ushlosha esronim solas mincha b'mitzora ksiv. This pasuk is by mitzora. B'mincha haba im hazevach. And the pasuk is referring to the mincha that accompanies the zevach. Meaning, b'minchas nesachim hakasam medaber. We're talking about minchas nesachim. The mitzora asher mevi gimel kavasim, because the wealthy mitzora brings 3 lambs. Ola v'chatos v'yasham. Ola, chatos, and asham. Hilkach boy shlosha esronim. That's why 3 staron are needed. Esa ola v'es hamincha mashma hamincha haba glal ola. It's mashma the mincha that is coming with the ola, accompanying the ola. And then nesachim refers to yayin, the wine libations. V'yayin lanesach beparshas nesachim ksiv. The words v'yayin lanesach is written by the parsha of nesachim. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Aleph Amid Beis.